After an impulsive act that shattered his life, a man lost between success and guilt finds his only chance at redemption in an unlikely bond with a wild horse. But is it too late? From his glass-walled office high above the city, Robert Anderson gazed out at Portland stretching beneath him. The orange hues of sunset reflected off the glass skyscrapers, many of them built by his own company. At 45, he commanded a business empire, his name emblazoned on buildings, business magazines, and on the lips of Portland residents. "You have a meeting with the board in 15 minutes, announced Martha, his secretary, through the half-open door. Robert nodded without turning, his eyes fixed on the city. Beside him, Thor, his imposing German shepherd, watched his owner with attentive eyes. The animal was more than an assistance dog. He was a silent confidant. "What do you think?" "Thor," he whispered while stroking the animal's head. "Was it worth it to get here?" Turning his wheelchair with skill acquired over the last 5 years, Robert moved to the solid mahogany desk. On it lay architectural plans for a new development, the largest ever undertaken by Anderson Developments. A project that could once and for all consolidate his position as the greatest businessman in Oregon. The door opened again, revealing Richard Mitchell, his partner of more than 2 decades. Tall, always impeccably dressed, Richard entered with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "The investors are eager to hear about Portland Gardens," said Richard, referring to the mega project on the desk. "Something tells me there's more than—" "Eagerness," replied Robert, noticing the slight tremor in his partner's hands. "What aren't you telling me, Richard?" "Just the usual pre-presentation nerves, you know me." But Robert felt that he didn't know him anymore. In recent months, Richard had been acting strangely. Secret meetings, phone calls lowered when he approached, documents hastily hidden. Thor emitted a low growl, something unusual when Richard was present. The dog, who once greeted the partner with joy, now kept his distance, as if sensing something. "Thor seems bothered by your presence lately," observed. "Robert, dogs are creatures of habit. Perhaps my frequent trips have confused him," replied Richard with a forced smile. "We should go. The shareholders don't like to wait." In the meeting room, 12 men and women were waiting. The tension was palpable. The Portland Gardens project wasn't just another development. It represented the company's future, with billions in investments and international partnerships. As Richard presented the numbers, Robert observed the reactions. Something didn't seem right. The exchanged glances, the whispers. There was information he didn't know, some secret circulating around that table. After the meeting, in his apartment on the top floor of one of the city's most luxurious buildings, Robert felt the weight of loneliness. The spacious living room, decorated with expensive artwork, seemed too empty, too cold. Thor approached, placing his head in his owner's lap. The animal seemed to understand his melancholy. Robert sighed, turning on the television to fill the silence. The local news showed images of Cascade Bridge, a symbol of Portland's modernity, the place where years ago his life had changed forever. The accident that had confined him to a wheelchair had happened there, on a rainy night like the one beginning to form outside. "Tomorrow is another day, my friend," he murmured to Thor, as he watched the first drops of rain hitting the window, not knowing that soon that bridge would again be the stage for an event that would change his life. Rain lashed Portland that October afternoon. Robert watched the drops streaming down his office window, forming small vertical rivers on the glass. The dark sky reflected his state of mind. "Are you sure you don't want to postpone the visit to the construction site?" asked Martha, visibly concerned about the intensifying storm. "I need to see with my own eyes how the project is progressing," replied Robert, adjusting his tie. "Thor is already in the car." The decision to go personally to Portland Gardens wasn't just professional. Something in the spreadsheets presented by Richard didn't match the initial projections. Elevated costs, extended deadlines, unknown suppliers. Small details that added up triggered an alert in his business mind. The driver was guiding the car down the main avenue when Robert asked them to stop at Cascade Bridge. He needed a moment. That place exerted a painful fascination over him. "Wait. Here," he instructed the driver. "I'll take a walk with Thor." With dexterity, he transferred himself to the motorized wheelchair, adapted to handle different terrains. Thor faithfully followed at his side, attentive to every movement. The rain had given a momentary truce, but the sky remained heavy, threatening. In the middle of the bridge, Robert stopped. Below, the river ran violently, swollen by the rain. Memories of the accident returned forcefully. The blinding headlights, the abrupt maneuver, the impact. Waking up in the hospital, life divided into before and after. It was then that he spotted, walking in the opposite direction, a little girl, no more than 9 years old, with brown hair in braids and dark glasses. At her side, a golden Labrador, with a vest identifying it as a guide dog. The girl was smiling, talking to the animal as if it were her best friend. Something in that scene awakened an unfamiliar emotion in Robert, a mixture of envy and resentment. That child, even in the darkness of her blindness, radiated happiness. She seemed complete, while he, with all his empire, felt empty. The storm suddenly returned, with a gust of wind and rain that made the girl lose her balance. The guide dog immediately positioned itself to support her. The Labrador looked at the girl with unconditional devotion, guiding her safely. "Rex, it's okay. Let's keep going. We're almost there." The girl's crystalline voice reached Robert's ears, even with the noise of the rain. In that instant, something broke inside Robert. A mix of anger, pain, and incomprehension took over his being. How could that child find so much joy in her condition, while he, with all his resources, couldn't overcome his own limitation? In an inexplicable impulse, when the Labrador passed by his side, Robert stretched out his foot and pushed it forcefully. The animal, surprised, lost its balance and fell off the side of the bridge, disappearing into the turbulent waters below. The girl's cry of despair echoed across the bridge. People passing by ran to help her. Thor, shocked by his owner's attitude, began to bark frantically, torn between loyalty to his owner and horror at what he had just witnessed. "My God, what have I done?" murmured Robert, suddenly aware of the gravity of his act. A woman passing by filmed the entire scene with her cell phone. Within minutes, the video was already circulating on social media. The man in the wheelchair, known throughout the city, had attacked a blind child's guide dog. "Mr. Anderson, we need to leave here now." His driver appeared at his side, pulling the chair. In the confusion that formed, Robert saw something on the riverbank. A dark silhouette, imposing, a horse black as night, wild, observing the scene. The animal seemed to judge Robert with its deep eyes. And then, the impossible happened. The horse advanced into the water, swimming against the current, to reach the place where the Labrador had fallen. Witnesses watched in astonishment as the wild animal led the injured guide dog back to shore, saving it from a tragic fate. Robert, paralyzed, observed the scene, while sirens announced the arrival of the police. His life, already fragmented by the accident years ago, had just completely shattered. And the strange black horse stared at him from the riverbank, like a living symbol of everything that had been lost in his heart. The next morning dawned with an unexpectedly clear sky, in contrast to the storm that now struck Robert's life. The newspaper headlines left no doubt about the magnitude of the scandal. Businessman Robert Anderson attacks blind child's guide dog. Social networks overflowed with indignation, incessantly sharing the video captured on Cascade Bridge. "Cancel all my appointments," Robert instructed Martha, whose voice on the phone barely disguised her discomfort, "and call Richard for an urgent meeting." In his apartment, Robert faced his own reflection in the bathroom mirror. His sunken eyes betrayed a sleepless night. Thor kept his distance, lying in the corner of the room, looking at his owner with a mixture of confusion and disappointment. The intercom announced the arrival of Charles Finley, his personal lawyer and longtime friend. "The situation is serious, Robert," said Charles without preamble, as he opened his laptop on the coffee table. "The repercussion is out of control. The girl's family has already filed a complaint, and we're facing a lawsuit for moral damages and animal abuse." "And the dog?" asked Robert, his voice almost a whisper. "It survived. It was rescued by that wild horse, the one they're now calling Thunder on social media. The animal is hospitalized in a veterinary clinic but should make a full recovery." A sigh of relief escaped Robert's lips. As incomprehensible as his act had been, The possibility of having caused the animal's death had tormented him all night. As for the girl, Luna Martinez, 9 years old, she's deeply traumatized. She's the daughter of Julia Martinez, the Channel 12 journalist. Robert closed his eyes. Julia Martinez was known for her relentless investigative reporting. The case would gain even more notoriety with this connection. The company's stocks have already fallen 15% since the market opened, continued Charles. Investors are in panic and some business partners have already expressed interest in terminating contracts. Robert's phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Messages from friends, colleagues, acquaintances, some of support, most of disappointment and disbelief. "And this horsebunt?" asked Robert, remembering the imposing black figure that had saved the dog. "Where did it come from?" "Nobody knows for sure. Residents of the area say it occasionally appears on the riverbanks. Some speculate it escaped from a farm on the outskirts of the city. It's being called a hero, the opposite of what—" Charles didn't complete the sentence, but he didn't need to. Robert perfectly understood what he had become, a villain in the public narrative. The intercom sounded again, announcing Richard's arrival. The partner entered the apartment with a grave expression. However, Robert noticed there was something more in his eyes. A kind of cold calculation, as if measuring the consequences of the situation. "The press is camped in front of the building," Richard informed, "and I received calls from 3 board members demanding your temporary removal from the company's management." "Removal?" Robert straightened in his chair, surprised. "They can't do that. I'm the founder, the major shareholder." "They can if they have a majority on the board," intervened Charles, "and with the falling stocks many are nervous." Richard checked his watch, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by Robert. "I have a meeting with the Portland Gardens investors in an hour. They want guarantees that the project won't be affected by the incident." The detached way Richard referred to what had happened bothered Robert. It was as if his partner had already discarded him, already planning the company's future without his presence. "I want to see the project accounts," Robert said suddenly. "The detailed financial reports, contracts with suppliers, everything." Richard turned slightly pale. "Now is not the time to worry about administrative details. We need to focus on controlling the damage to the company's image." Thor, who had remained quiet since the visitor's arrival, approached Richard and began to growl. The German shepherd, usually friendly, was showing his teeth to the man who had frequented his owner's house for years. "Seems I'm not the only one with inexplicable attitudes around here," commented Robert, observing his dog's reaction. When Richard and Charles departed, Robert was left alone with his thoughts. Through the window, he spotted Cascade Bridge in the distance, and below it the riverbanks where the mysterious black horse had performed its heroic act. Something began to clear in his mind. He needed to discover what was behind Richard's behavior, and perhaps find a form of redemption through this discovery. A week after the incident, Robert was observing the gardens of his mansion from his office window. The reporters had finally given up camping in front of the gates, but the damage to his reputation was far from repaired. Television networks continued replaying the video in which he, impulsively, pushed the guide dog of little Luna. The image of the black horse, now known as Thunder, rescuing the Labrador, had become a symbol of hope, contrasting with the villainy attributed to Robert. The intercom bell rang. It was Amanda Villiers, the psychologist Robert had hired, following Charles's recommendation. "We need to talk about what happened on the bridge," said Amanda, after accepting a cup of coffee, "to understand what triggered that reaction." "I can't explain it," he replied, turning his wheelchair to face the psychologist. "It was as if something inside me exploded when I saw that girl so happy, despite her condition. While you, even, with all your resources, can't find peace with yours." Robert nodded. The idea that a blind child could navigate the world with more confidence than he, a powerful man in a wheelchair, had touched a deep wound. "But there's something else," he continued, as Thor approached, resting his head in his lap. "Something related to Richard's behavior and the company's finances. I have the impression that things are happening behind my back." Amanda observed him carefully. "Do you think the incident on the bridge and your suspicions about the company are connected?" In some way? Not directly. But since the accident that put me in this chair 5 years ago, I've delegated more responsibilities to Richard. Perhaps too many. After the session, Robert called Charles, who was also the company's accountant. "I need you to do a discreet audit of Anderson Development's accounts," he requested. "Focus on the Portland Gardens project. Is there something specific I should look for? Any irregularity, especially related to contracts with suppliers and politicians? I've noticed Richard getting increasingly close to Councilman Owen Matthews." Charles paused on the other end of the line. "Owen Matthews, the chairman of the City Works Committee? He doesn't have a very good reputation." "Exactly," interrupted Robert. "I want to know if there's money from our company going into his hands." That night, while dining alone, Robert received an unexpected call. "Mr. Anderson, this is Julia Martinez, Luna's mother." Robert felt his heart race. The journalist, mother of the girl whose dog he had attacked, was on the phone. He expected accusations, threats, perhaps even insults. I want to apologize for what happened," he said hesitantly. "I'm not calling to hear apologies," replied Julia, with a firm voice, but surprisingly controlled. "I'm calling because there's something bigger happening, and you need to know." Robert frowned, confused. "Bigger? How so?" "I'm investigating a corruption scheme involving public and private works in Portland," she explained. "And Anderson Developments appears in some documents I've obtained." "Impossible. My company has always operated within the law." "I believe so, at least as far as you know. But your partner, Richard Mitchell, has been having frequent meetings with Owen Matthews, meetings that don't appear on any official agenda." Robert felt a chill run down his spine. His suspicions were taking shape. "Why are you telling me this?" "After what I did. Because I believe you're also a victim in a way, and because Luna told me something strange yesterday." "What?" "She said that, moments before you pushed Rex, she saw a dark shadow approach you. I know it sounds mystical, and it's probably just a child's imagination, but a shadow?" Robert remembered the sensation he had at that moment, as if something beyond his control had dominated him. "When can we talk about this in person?" "Tomorrow, at Old Cafe at 10 a.m. I'll bring some documents I have. And, Mr. Anderson?" "Yes?" "Luna." "Says fine. Rex is recovering thanks to Thunder." After hanging up, Robert remained thoughtful. Thor, sensing his owner's unease, approached, looking towards the window. Outside, in the garden's dimness, Robert could swear he saw an equine silhouette, observing the house, but when he blinked, the image disappeared. His phone vibrated with a message from Charles. "Found something. We need to talk urgently." The pieces were beginning to fit together. The incident on the bridge, the suspicions about Richard, the corruption, the mysterious presence of Thunder. Robert felt he was about to discover a truth much greater than he had imagined. Old Cafe, with its preserved early 20th century architecture, offered the discretion that Robert and Julia needed. He arrived purposely early, choosing a table in the back, with Thor lying silently beside his wheelchair. Some looks of recognition followed him, but the scandal was already beginning to be replaced by new controversies in the voracious news cycle. Julia arrived punctually, accompanied not only by a folder of documents, but also by little Luna, and to Robert's surprise, the Labrador Rex, already recovered, though with a slight limp. "I thought it was important for Luna and Rex to come," explained Julia, helping her daughter to sit. "For all of us to face what happened and move forward." Luna, with her dark glasses and perfectly aligned braids, maintained a neutral expression. Rex, recognizing Thor, wagged his tail slightly without fear or resentment. "I apologize from the bottom of my heart," said Robert, addressing the girl. "What I did was unforgivable." "Mum says everyone deserves a second chance," replied Luna, with surprising maturity for her 9 years. "And Thunder saved Rex, so I think the universe is already balancing things out." The waiter served hot chocolates for Luna and coffees for the adults. When the girl was entertained with her hot chocolate, Julia opened the folder and slid some documents to Robert. "For the last 6 months, I've been investigating a bribery scheme involving infrastructure projects in Portland, she explained, in a low voice. Owen Matthews is at the center of the operation, facilitating licenses and approvals in exchange for commissions. Robert examined the papers, copies of bank transfers, coded emails, photos of secret meetings. His heart sank as he recognized his company's name on several documents. It's not possible. I would never authorize. Exactly, interrupted Julia. The operations are conducted without your knowledge, especially after your accident. Richard Mitchell has been the direct contact with Matthews. The suspicions that had been growing in Robert finally took concrete form. Richard's strange trips, the secret meetings, the numbers that didn't add up in the Portland Gardens project. But why are you sharing this with me? As a journalist, shouldn't you publish the story? Julia took a sip of coffee, her eyes fixed. On Robert. 2 reasons. First, I don't yet have enough evidence for a public accusation. Second, I believe you're also a victim in this situation. And honestly, after what happened on the bridge, you mean after I showed everyone what kind of monster I am? No, after something strange happened. To you on the bridge. Luna insists she saw a shadow approach you moments before the incident. Luna, who apparently was distracted with her chocolate, intervened. It was like black smoke surrounding you, and it had eyes, red eyes. A shiver ran down Robert's spine. The description sounded fanciful, but he perfectly remembered the sensation of not being in control of his actions at that moment. And there's more, continued Julia, leaning forward. It's not the first time something like this has happened. 3 other people involved in Matthews's scheme have had similar episodes. Completely out-of-character behaviors that led them to public disgrace. Robert looked at Thor, who now rested beside Rex, the 2 dogs in a peace that their owners still sought. So you think I was manipulated somehow, to publicly discredit myself? I'm not sure, but the timing was too convenient. Just when you were beginning to question the numbers of the Portland Gardens project. At this moment, Robert's phone vibrated. It was a message from Charles. Discovered transfers of $5 million to an offshore linked to Matthews. Documents in your email. Be careful. Richard knows we're investigating. I need to go, said Robert, showing the message to Julia. If Richard discovered we're investigating, we have to act quickly. I'm coming with you, decided Julia. This might be the chance to get the evidence I need for the report. Luna, sensing the gravity of the situation, caressed Rex. Thunder will help you, she said with conviction. He appears when we need him. Robert looked at the girl, intrigued. How do you know about Thunder? I sense him. Even without seeing, I know when he's nearby. It's as if he's watching, protecting. As they left the cafe, a storm was forming. Over Portland, heavy clouds laden with rain and electricity. Robert looked at the sky and for an instant thought he saw the silhouette of a horse among the clouds. Where are we going? Asked Julia, following Robert to his adapted car. To the headquarters of Anderson Developments. It's time to confront Richard and discover the truth about what's happening in my company. As the driver guided the vehicle through the city, Robert felt a determination growing inside him. If he had been manipulated, used as a pawn in a larger game, it was time to take back control. And perhaps in the process, find the redemption he so sought. The storm intensified when Robert's car stopped in front of the imposing Anderson Developments building. Thunder rumbled in the sky, as if announcing the imminent confrontation. Julia, who had come in her own vehicle, parked right behind, with Luna and Rex remaining in the car under the care of her assistant. Are you sure you want to do this now? Asked Julia, as she helped Robert transfer to his wheelchair. Thor, always vigilant, positioned himself beside his owner. I've never been so sure, he replied with renewed determination. I've already allowed too many things to happen behind my back. I won't hide anymore. In the building's lobby, the security guards immediately recognized their president, despite his prolonged absence. The look of surprise on their faces didn't go unnoticed. Mr. Mitchell is in a meeting on the top floor, informed the receptionist, visibly disconcerted, with Councilman Matthews and other investors. Perfect, Robert smiled, a humorless smile. That's exactly who I need to talk to. In the elevator, Julia turned on her camera, strategically hidden in her blazer lapel. As an investigative journalist, she was prepared to document whatever they might find. "If the accusations are true, this goes beyond a common corruption scheme," she commented. "We're talking about psychological manipulation, perhaps even something supernatural," completed Robert. "It seems absurd. But after what happened on the bridge, after what Luna said about the shadow, and considering Thunder's appearance, I don't know what to believe anymore." The elevator doors opened directly onto the executive floor. Richard's secretary rose, startled to see Robert. "Mr. Anderson, we weren't expecting. It wasn't on the schedule." "This is my company, Claudia," he replied, advancing with his chair toward the meeting room. "I don't need an appointment." Thor followed faithfully, his behavior alerting Robert to something wrong. The dog was tense, with the fur on his neck bristling. Without knocking, Robert opened the door to the meeting room. Around the long glass table, 6 men interrupted their conversation. Richard, standing before a presentation, visibly paled. Beside him, Councilman Owen Matthews maintained an impassive, almost amused expression. "Robert!" exclaimed Richard, quickly recovering from the initial shock. "What a pleasant surprise. We were just discussing the final details of Portland Gardens." "I imagine so," replied Robert, approaching the table. "Discussing how to divide the millions diverted from the project, isn't that right?" A heavy silence fell over the room. Julia discreetly positioned herself to capture the reactions with her hidden camera. "I don't know what you're talking about," said Richard, trying to maintain his composure. "I believe the stress of recent events is affecting your judgment." "My judgment is perfectly clear." Robert removed a flash drive from his pocket. "Here are copies of all the transfers to offshore accounts, coded emails, records of unofficial meetings, everything that Charles discovered before you realized we were investigating." Richard's face contorted into a mask of fury. "You have no idea what you're doing, Robert. There are much greater interests at stake. Like manipulating people to commit unthinkable acts and destroy themselves publicly," intervened Julia, revealing her identity. "Like you did with Robert on the bridge." Owen Matthews, who until then had been observing the scene with detachment, rose slowly. There was something disturbing about his presence, an aura that made the environment seem darker, colder. "Miss Martinez, the famous journalist," he said with a strangely melodious voice, "always sniffing around stories where you shouldn't. How is your lovely daughter, Luna, isn't that right?" The mention of her daughter made Julia shudder, but she remained firm. "Don't try to intimidate me, Matthews. I have copies of all the documents in safe locations." A particularly strong thunder shook the building and the lights flickered. Thor began to growl, focused not on Richard, but on Matthews. Robert felt a shiver run down his spine as he noticed a strange shadow behind the councilman, as if his silhouette expanded beyond physical limits. "Do you really believe your accident 5 years ago was a coincidence, Robert?" asked Matthews with a disturbing smile. "Or the incident on the bridge?" The revelation hit Robert like a physical blow. His eyes met Richard's, seeking denial but finding only guilt. "You knew?" he asked his partner, his voice trembling with anger and disbelief. "You knew about the accident?" Before Richard could answer, a rumble came from the street. Everyone turned to the large windows that overlooked the city. Down below, imposing under the torrential rain, was Thunder, the black horse, directly observing the top floor of the building. The animal neighed, a sound that inexplicably seemed audible even at that distance. The presence of Thunder in the streets of Portland, under the storm, momentarily diverted everyone's attention in the room. Owen Matthews approached the window, his countenance transforming into something almost unrecognizable. The shadow that seemed to emanate from him expanded, darkening the environment even more. "That damned animal again," he murmured, with a voice that no longer sounded entirely human. "Always interfering." Thor barked furiously, positioning himself between Matthews and Robert, as if perceiving a danger that the others were only beginning to understand. Julia discreetly continued filming, while the other businessmen in the room looked at each other in confusion, clearly unaware of the true nature of what was happening. "What's going on here?" demanded Robert, his voice recovering the authority of old. "Richard, what's this story about my accident not being a coincidence?" Richard seemed torn, his gaze alternating between Matthews and his old friend and partner. "Robert, you don't understand. After we discovered that irregularity in the Portland Gardens land, Matthews offered us a solution. We didn't know that he—" "Silence," ordered Matthews without turning. His attention remained fixed on the black horse below. "You've already said too much." A flash of understanding crossed Robert's mind. The irregularity mentioned by Richard was an environmental problem he had discovered 5 years ago, shortly before his accident. The land where Portland Gardens would be built had an unmapped spring, which would legally prevent the construction of the billion-dollar development. "You sabotaged my car," said Robert, anger growing in his voice. "You tried to kill me to proceed with the illegal project." "Killing would be too conspicuous," replied Matthews, turning slowly. There was something wrong with his eyes, something that made Julia instinctively back away. "Just neutralize you. A wheelchair is a much more convenient fate. Keeps you alive but powerless." One of the businessmen present stood up, clearly uncomfortable. "I don't know what kind of meeting this is, but I want no part in it," he declared, heading for the door. Matthews made a small gesture with his hand, and the man froze as if invisible cords held him. "Nobody leaves until we're finished," he said, with a disturbing calm. "All of you profited from our agreements. All have dirty hands." Julia stepped forward, recovering the journalistic courage that characterized her. "What are you?" she asked Matthews directly. "Because clearly you're not just a corrupt politician." A sinister smile crossed Matthews's face. "Let's say I'm someone who feeds on the misfortune of others, Miss Martinez. Corruption, betrayal, suffering. They are powerful forces, and Portland has been a particularly delicious feast." Outside, thunder neighed again, and this time the sound reverberated clearly through the room, as if it had passed through the glass of the windows. Matthews visibly shuddered, his shadow momentarily receding. "That damned animal," he hissed. "Always showing up to interfere. First saving the dog, now this." "Thunder isn't a simple horse, is he?" questioned Robert, beginning to connect the puzzle pieces. "Just as you're not a simple man." A particularly strong thunder shook the building, and the lights went out completely, plunging the room into almost absolute darkness. The only illumination came from occasional lightning and, strangely, from a faint glow emanating from Thor's eyes. In the dark, Matthew's voice sounded even more disturbing. "There are forces in this world that you, common mortals, can barely comprehend. Ancient forces existing in the interstices between light and shadow. Thunder is an intruder, an unwanted guardian. I, on the other hand, thrive in the darkness that inhabits men's hearts." Lightning momentarily illuminated the room, revealing that Matthews's shadow had expanded, covering part of the walls like a living, pulsating stain. Richard was huddled in a corner, the other businessman paralyzed with fear. "It was you who made me attack Luna's dog," stated Robert, a bitter understanding taking hold of him. "You somehow influenced me." "I only awakened what already existed within you, Robert. The envy, the resentment for your condition. I merely amplified those feelings. The act was yours, although the impulse was encouraged." Julia, who had silently approached Robert, leaned down to whisper, "Luna is in the car downstairs near Thunder. She said she felt something wrong up here." Before they could elaborate a plan, the lights suddenly came back on. Matthews stood before them, but something had changed. His figure seemed distorted, like an image seen through rippled glass. "Enough talk," he declared. "Richard, it's time to finalize our agreement. Robert must sign the documents transferring total control of the project to you. Afterward, a tragic accident right here in the office." "You're crazy if you think I'll sign anything," interrupted Robert, turning his wheelchair to directly face Matthews. Thor at his side maintained an attack position. "Oh, you will sign," assured Matthews, slowly advancing. "Just as you attacked that dog without wanting to. Your will is malleable to me." At that moment, Thor leaped, interposing himself between his owner and the threat that Matthews represented. The German shepherd, normally docile, showed supernatural ferocity, his eyes glowing with increasing intensity. Simultaneously, a rumble came from the building's entrance, as if something powerful had broken down the doors. The alarm system triggered, and screams of panic could be heard from the lower floors. "He entered the building," murmured Matthews, a touch of apprehension in his distorted voice. "The damned horse entered the building." A smile of understanding appeared on Robert's lips. Whatever Thunder's nature, the animal had come to his aid. The battle between light and shadow, represented by the black horse and the entity that Matthews seemed to harbor, was about to reach its climax. The sound of hooves against marble echoed through the Anderson Developments building, approaching. With each second, the businessman present in the room, finally freed from the paralysis imposed by Matthews, ran to the door, only to find it inexplicably locked. "Nobody leaves," declared Matthews, his voice now completely transformed, deep, and reverberating like the thunder that gave the approaching horse its name. "This ends today." His shadow continued to expand, gaining volume and texture, as if it were detaching from surfaces and acquiring a life of its own. Richard, visibly terrified, retreated to the furthest wall. "You never explained that it was something like this," stammered the treacherous partner. "You only talked about political influence, about facilitating business." Matthews cast a look of disdain at Richard. "And you believed all that power came just from political connections? Fool. Humans have always been easy to manipulate with promises of wealth and power." Julia positioned herself beside Robert, her camera still discreetly recording. Thor remained in a defensive posture, his fur glowing with a silvery luminescence that defied explanation. "What exactly are you?" questioned Robert, maintaining calm despite the extraordinary situation. "And what do you really want?" A distorted smile formed on Matthews's increasingly less human face. "I am very ancient, Robert Anderson. I existed before this city, before this country. Some have called me a demon, others a spirit of corruption. The names don't matter. What matters is that I thrive in chaos, in betrayal, in the fall of the righteous." As he spoke, the temperature in the room dropped drastically. On the windows, the glass began to freeze, forming crystalline patterns that partially blocked the view of the storm outside. "And what about Thunder?" asked Julia, buying time as the sound of hooves grew closer. "Is he your opposite? Some kind of force for good?" "Thunder is a meddler," replied Matthews with contempt. "A guardian who should have remained dormant. But there is always balance, isn't there? When enough darkness accumulates, light finds a way." A violent rumble shook the meeting room door. Wood cracked, metal bent. Another impact, and the door partially yielded, revealing not an ordinary horse, but a majestic creature. Thunder, seen up close, was much more impressive than the media images suggested. His black coat shone with bluish reflections, as if it contained the night sky itself. His eyes, of an intense electric blue, immediately fixed on Matthews. "Here comes the White Knight," mocked Matthews, although a tremor in his voice betrayed genuine apprehension, or rather the black horse in this case. Thunder advanced into the room, his presence somehow expanding the space around him, as if reality itself bent to accommodate him. At his side now was Luna, the blind girl whom Robert had harmed on the bridge. She kept her hand firmly supported on the animal's flank without any fear. "He brought me here," explained the girl, her childish voice carrying an ancient wisdom. "Said he needed my help." "Luna!" Julia ran to her daughter, embracing her protectively. "It's dangerous." "Not for her," intervened Robert, a sudden understanding illuminating his mind. "Luna can see beyond appearances, can't she? That's why she noticed the shadow enveloping me on the bridge." The girl nodded. "I see colors and lights that others don't see, even being blind to the world that you see." Thor approached Thunder and Luna as if recognizing allies. The German shepherd and the black horse exchanged a look of mutual understanding. "Enough of this farce!" shouted Matthews, his voice shaking the windows already weakened by the supernatural cold. The shadow that enveloped him now almost didn't allow seeing his original human form. With a gesture, he threw Richard against the wall with violent force. The man slid to the floor, unconscious but alive. If I can't have control of the company, by the easy method I'll take it by the hard way, declared the entity. I'll eliminate all of you and manipulate the evidence. It wouldn't be the first corporate accident I've orchestrated. Thunder neighed, a sound that more resembled a roar of defiance. The animal advanced, interposing itself between the shadowy creature and the humans. Luna, still beside the horse, extended her hand to Robert. He needs your help too, said the girl. Your redemption. Hesitantly, Robert extended his hand, touching Luna and Thunder simultaneously. At the moment of contact, a current of energy coursed through his body. Images flooded his mind. The spring on the Portland Gardens land glowing with its own light. Matthews, or the entity that inhabited him, slowly contaminating the city through acts of corruption and evil. And Thunder, guardian dormant for centuries, awakened by the accumulation of darkness. The spring, murmured Robert, the pieces fitting together. It's not just water. It's a point of power, isn't it? That's why you wanted that specific piece of land so badly. Matthews, the entity, hissed, confirming the theory. A nexus of pure energy, hidden beneath your precious city, the source that keeps creatures like Thunder dormant, or that can amplify my power 1,000-fold. And that's why you needed to neutralize me, concluded Robert, because I discovered the spring and planned to preserve it. And I will still succeed, guaranteed the creature, advancing threateningly. It was at that moment that Thor leapt, followed by Rex, who had silently appeared through the damaged door. The two dogs, apparently coordinated by some invisible force, attacked the shadow that enveloped Matthews. At the same time, Thunder reared up, his hooves gleaming like polished steel when they hit the ground, creating an impact that shook the entire building. A crack appeared in the floor of the meeting room, running toward the shadowy creature. Matthews, the entity, screamed, a sound that didn't belong to this world, as the fissure expanded under his feet. From the opening sprouted not destruction, but light, a crystalline light, like water, illuminated from within. "The spring!" exclaimed Julia, amazed. "Somehow it's connected all the way here." Robert, still touching Thunder and Luna, felt another wave of understanding. It wasn't a coincidence. The Anderson Developments building had been built over an underground branch of the same aquifer system that fed the spring on the Portland Gardens land. "You built your empire on the same power you were trying to corrupt," said Robert to the shadowy creature, which now retreated from the light sprouting from the floor. "The irony is almost poetic." Matthews, the entity, roared with fury, his form increasingly less human, more like an amorphous mass of darkness. The temperature in the room plummeted even further, and the window glass shattered with the intense cold. "This isn't over," vociferated the creature. "I may be temporarily banished, but I'll return. I always return. Human greed always brings me back." Thunder advanced, his blue eyes fixed on the shadowy creature. Thor and Rex flanked the horse, forming a united front against the darkness. Luna, still holding Robert's hand, whispered, "Now you need to truly choose your side, Mr. Anderson, redemption or fall." It was in this crucial moment that Robert Anderson, powerful businessman and broken man, made his definitive choice. Robert Anderson rose from his wheelchair. The movement was instinctive, unthinking, and absolutely impossible. 5 years of paralysis disappeared in the instant his decision was made. The light emanating from the fissure in the floor seemed to flow through him, filling each cell of his body with restorative energy. "Impossible!" screamed the shadowy creature, its voice distorted by panic. "You cannot." "I am choosing Matthews," replied Robert, his feet touching the floor for the first time in half a decade. The sensation was indescribable. "I am choosing redemption. I am choosing to protect what truly matters." Julia observed the scene, astonished, her camera now forgotten in the face of the miracle she was witnessing. Luna, on the other hand, smiled serenely, as if she had always known this moment would come. "The spring," explained the girl. "It's not just water, it's life, it's healing. It's what keeps Thunder strong and what can restore what was corrupted." Understanding hit Robert like a wave. Portland Gardens should never have been built on that specific land. The spring was a sacred place, a point of balance that kept entities like the one now inhabiting Matthews at bay. Thor and Rex positioned themselves beside Thunder, the three animals forming a luminous barrier between the shadow creature and the humans. The light from the fissure expanded, revealing not just water but a flow of pure energy that seemed to connect directly with Thunder. "You don't understand what you're refusing," hissed Matthews, the entity, its human form almost completely dissolved in the dark mass that enveloped it. "Unlimited power, Robert, wealth beyond imagination. I could even completely restore your body, not just allow you to stand for a few moments." Robert took a step forward, testing his newly recovered legs. There was no pain, no weakness. It was as if the accident had never happened. "I don't need your offers," he replied, with the clarity of someone who finally understands his purpose. "I already have everything that truly matters." In a fluid movement, Robert approached Thunder and, for the first time, directly touched the magnificent animal. The contact provoked another wave of energy, more intense than the previous one. Visions filled his mind. The history of Portland before it was even a city, the spring, guarded for centuries by protectors like Thunder, and the slow infiltration of shadows, fed by human greed and corruption. "This city doesn't belong to the shadows," declared Robert, his voice carrying an authority that transcended his business position. "And I won't allow you to corrupt it further." Richard, who was slowly regaining consciousness in the corner of the room, observed the transformation of his former friend with astonishment. "Robert, I didn't know, he never said." "Silence," roared the creature. "You knew enough, Richard Mitchell. You knew you were betraying your friend. You knew you were participating in corruption. The rest was just a matter of degree, not nature." Thunder neighed, a sound that more resembled a call to war, and advanced against the shadowy entity. Thor and Rex followed, barking fiercely. The light from the fissure intensified, forming a circular pattern on the floor that encompassed Matthews, the creature. "What's happening?" asked Julia, protecting Luna in her arms. "The spring is reclaiming what belongs to it," explained Robert, observing the phenomenon with an understanding he didn't know he possessed. "It's purifying what was corrupted." The shadowy entity thrashed inside the circle of light, its form increasingly less defined, like smoke being dispersed by the wind. Matthew's physical body became visible again, an ordinary middle-aged man, unconscious and vulnerable. The councilman was just a host, understood Robert. He probably didn't fully remember what he did when under the entity's influence. "How did you know what to do?" asked Julia, cautiously approaching. Robert looked at Luna, then at Thunder. "I didn't know. I just trusted. In the horse, in the girl, in the spring. Sometimes we just need to have faith in what's greater than ourselves." The shadowy creature emitted a final cry of fury before being completely absorbed by the light. The luminous circle pulsed 3 times with increasing intensity, and then rapidly contracted, disappearing into the fissure that was beginning to close. Where the mass of shadows had been, only the unconscious body of Owen Matthews remained, an ordinary man, without the supernatural power that had inhabited him. Silence took over the meeting room. The broken windows allowed wind and rain to enter, but the storm outside was beginning to abate. Robert looked at his own legs, still not fully believing the transformation he had experienced. "Will it last?" he asked Luna, uncertain if the miraculous cure would be permanent. The girl smiled, her blind eyes seeming to see something beyond the reach of others. "The spring gave you what you needed, not what you desired. If you need to walk to complete your journey, then you'll walk." Robert tested his legs again, taking a few steps around the room. Each movement was a small miracle, a gift he had never expected to receive. "We need to alert the authorities," said Julia, looking at the unconscious bodies of Richard and Matthews. "There's much to explain." "And how will we explain this?" asked Robert, gesturing to Thunder, to the fissure slowly closing in the floor, to his own recovered legs. "We won't explain," replied Julia, with the wisdom of someone who understands the limits of human comprehension. "Some things must remain between us. What we can prove are the corruption schemes, the documents, the illegal transfers. The rest is for us to keep." Thunder approached Robert, his deep blue eyes fixed on his. The businessman felt a connection that transcended words, a silent understanding of what needed to be done. "Portland Gardens will never be built," he declared. "At least not as planned. The spring will be preserved, protected." "And the company?" questioned Julia. "It will be rebuilt on new principles. Transparency, sustainability, social responsibility. Not just empty words in corporate reports, but real values." Thor and Rex, side by side, observed their owners with the unwavering loyalty that only animals can demonstrate. In their eyes, Robert saw the same glow that emanated from Thunder, a connection to something greater, purer, truer. Luna approached Robert and, surprisingly, took his hand without hesitation. "You are forgiven," she said, with the simplicity and frankness of a child. "By Rex, by me, by the spring, but most importantly, you need to forgive yourself." Tears welled in Robert's eyes. The weight of guilt, which he had carried not just for the incident on the bridge, but for years of questionable decisions, began to dissipate. "How can I completely redeem myself?" he asked, his voice choked with emotion. "By protecting what is sacred," replied Luna. "The spring, the city, the people. By being the guardian you were always meant to be." Thunder neighed softly, as if agreeing with the girl's words. The majestic animal began to retreat toward the damaged door. Its mission seemed fulfilled, at least for now. "Is he leaving?" asked Robert, feeling a pang of sadness as he watched the horse withdraw. "Thunder will always be nearby," assured Luna. "As long as the spring flows, as long as there's someone to protect it." In the meeting room of Anderson Developments, where before only profits and expansions were planned, a new purpose was now born. Robert Anderson, standing for the first time in 5 years, felt the weight of the responsibility he was assuming, not just as a businessman, but as a guardian of something much more valuable than money or power. Redemption, he now understood, wasn't a destination, but a journey that was just beginning. 6 months had passed since the extraordinary events at the Anderson Developments headquarters. Portland was awakening to another spring morning, the sky a crystalline blue that seemed to reflect the purity of the spring, now officially protected. Robert observed the city from the terrace of his apartment, no longer with the distant gaze of someone who feels imprisoned, but with the tranquil determination of a guardian. His legs had remained strong, the miracle of healing persisting as a constant reminder of his mission. "The last documents from the Wellspring Foundation arrived for your signature," informed Martha, now not just his secretary, but executive, director of the new non-profit organization created by Robert. The Wellspring Foundation had risen from the ashes of the scandal that had shaken Portland. After the arrests of Richard and others involved in the corruption schemes, Robert had completely reorganized his business. The land where Portland Gardens would have been built had been transformed into an ecological park, with the spring as its beating heart. "Julia is waiting in the hall," continued Martha, "with Luna and Rex." A smile illuminated Robert's face. His friendship with the journalist and her daughter had blossomed, transforming into something close to family. Thor, hearing Rex's name, raised his head, excited by the prospect of seeing his new canine friend. "Tell them I'll be right down," he replied, finishing his coffee. In the building's hall, Luna was playing with Rex, the Labrador fully recovered from his injuries. Beside them, Julia was reviewing some notes, probably related to the series of reports on environmental preservation she had been producing. "Uncle Robert," exclaimed Luna, upon sensing his approach, an almost supernatural ability the girl possessed. Embraced her affectionately, still amazed by the wisdom that 9-year-old child demonstrated. "Ready for the big day?" he asked, referring to the official inauguration of Wellspring Park, scheduled for that afternoon. "I was born ready," she replied with a smile. "Thunder will be there." The mention of the mysterious black horse still gave Robert goosebumps. In the months following the confrontation, Thunder had occasionally been seen near the spring, always observing from a distance like a silent sentinel. "How do you know?" asked Julia, looking up from her notes. "I sense him," replied Luna simply, caressing Rex. "He's eager." The journey to the park was peaceful, with Robert driving his own car for the first time in 5 years. The sensation of freedom was indescribable, as was the responsibility he now carried. Wellspring Park had been designed to integrate perfectly with the existing nature. Instead of concrete and steel, sustainable wood, local stone, and extensive green spaces predominated. In the center, protected by a graceful gazebo, the spring flowed freely, its crystalline waters capturing and reflecting the sunlight. "It's even more beautiful than in the plans," commented Julia, clearly impressed. Dozens of people were already gathering for the inauguration. Officials, journalists, local residents. Among them, Robert spotted a familiar figure, Owen Matthews. The former councilman walked with the aid of a cane, his appearance much frailer than before. After the events of that stormy night, Matthews had awakened completely transformed. Without any memory of the acts committed while under the shadowy entity's influence, he had become a shadow of the powerful man he once was. "Are you sure it was a good idea to invite him?" asked Julia, noticing Robert's gaze. "Everyone deserves a second chance," he replied, remembering his own journey of redemption. Besides, he was also a victim, in his own way. The ceremony began with an emotional speech from Robert. Without going into the supernatural details that only a few knew, he spoke about the importance of environmental preservation, corporate transparency, and social responsibility. "This park is not just a green space in our city," he declared. "It's a symbol of what we can achieve when we choose to protect what is truly valuable, when we choose light over shadow." As he spoke, Robert noticed a movement at the edge of the forest surrounding the park. There, partially hidden among the trees, was Thunder. The black horse remained motionless, majestic, its blue eyes fixed on the spring and, at moments, on Robert. Luna, next to Julia in the front row, smiled in the direction of the animal, as if she could see it clearly despite her blindness. After the ceremony, while the guests explored the new park, Robert found a moment to step away. Guided by an inexplicable instinct, he headed to the edge of the forest where he had seen Thunder. The horse was still there, waiting. As he approached, Robert felt the same connection he had experienced on that night of confrontation. A mutual understanding that transcended words. "Thank you," he said simply, extending his hand to touch the powerful flank of the animal. Thunder neighed softly, inclining his head as if in approval. In the horse's eyes, Robert saw reflected his own transformation, from a broken and bitter man to a guardian conscious of his purpose. "He's happy with you," said Luna, who had approached silently, guided by Rex. "He says you made the right choice." "You can talk to him?" asked Robert, surprised. "Not exactly talk," explained the girl, caressing Thunder's muzzle without hesitation. "It's more like feeling. He's very ancient, you know. He was here long before the city existed." Thunder snorted, as if confirming Luna's words. "And will he stay around?" questioned Robert. "As long as necessary," replied Luna. "As long as—" "The spring needs protection, as long as you need a reminder." "A reminder? That redemption is possible," said the girl with that wisdom that seemed to come from another dimension, "that it's never too late to choose the path of light." Julia joined them, surprised to see her daughter so close to the imposing black horse. "So this is the famous Thunder," she commented, maintaining a respectful distance. "I never imagined he would be so impressive." "Some miracles don't need to be explained," philosophized Robert. "Just accepted and honored." As the sun began to set over Wellspring Park, casting golden hues on the crystalline water springing from the earth, Robert Anderson contemplated the strange and wonderful path that life had traced for him. From the heights of business success to the confinement of a wheelchair, from the despair of an impulsive moment to redemption through a supernatural confrontation. Thunder, sensing it was time to depart, backed up a few steps. The horse looked one last time at the small group. The redeemed businessman, the courageous journalist, the blind girl with extraordinary vision, and the two loyal dogs, before turning and disappearing among the trees. Thor approached his owner, resting his head in his hand, as he had always done in moments of contemplation. "Where is he going?" asked Julia, watching the horse retreat. "Wherever he's needed," replied Robert. "But he'll always return when we need him." Luna, smiling serenely, completed, "He's never really far away, just as the spring never stops flowing, even when we can't see it." Hand in hand, the unlikely trio walked back to the park where the celebration continued. The spring sparkled under the last rays of the sun, a constant reminder of the power of nature and the human capacity to begin anew. Robert Anderson, walking on his own legs, finally understood that his true strength had never been in his business, empire, but in his capacity to choose, to protect, to redeem himself. And as long as the spring continued to flow, as long as thunder guarded the shadows, that strength would remain, a legacy much more valuable than concrete towers and bank accounts. A new beginning, a new story, a new chance to make a difference.